Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's webinar. Our topic for today, we're going to talk about demand planning. Last month, we covered capacity planning, and really the two go hand in hand. There'll be some crossover there that we'll talk through how these two work together. So we're going to talk about demand planning. We'll talk about the definition of demand and the different ways, some ways, when you talk about demand, it's obviously your existing work, your new work, and how do we manage that in OpenAir? How do we forecast for our resources to drive our demand? We'll talk some tips and tricks, and then we'll talk about some demand reporting options in OpenAir. Okay, so what is the definition of demand, which and different than what we talked about last month with capacity, right? Demand is what is the staff needed to deliver our services? So do we have enough resources, whether that's enough hours to be able to deliver the work that we're bringing in? So our demand requires us to look at not only what our backlog is, right? What services have we sold that we've yet to deliver to our customers, but also what are we expecting to sell? What is our pipeline? So you really have to marry the two to be able to come up with a demand to be able to deliver. And there's a couple different forecasting approaches that we'll take a look at to determine your staffing needs. Let's focus on pipeline. There's kind of three ways to look at forecasting needs. What is the full-time equivalent headcount needed? So this gets back to our FTE requirements. And what do we need from a headcount perspective? This is kind of the highest level and is not as quite pinpoint accurate as some of the other options. What are the hours we need to deliver? Now we're getting a little more granular and we're talking about hours by different resources. Hours that we need to be able to forecast out what we're going to need in the future. And then lastly, what is the dollars that we're going to be delivering in the future along with our backlog? So a combination of all these can be very useful. They can all answer a question and tell a story, and it's important that we come look at those options to see what our demand is going to look like. What is an FTE? So an FTE in OpenAir is kind of a full-time equivalent, and it really works based on a work schedule. So if I'm one person, or if I have a demand for 100% of someone's schedule, 8 hours a day, then that's going to, I'm an FTE, and we'll need to plan our FTE accordingly. OpenAir has standard FTE reporting values. We talked a little bit about this last month in our capacity. There's assigned FTE and booked FTE are the two primary. There's some other options as well. These are the two we most often see customers benefiting from. Obviously, it depends on how you're future planning your resource needs and demands, whether you're using project assignments or resource bookings. It does require, that you are looking to the future based on your resource requirements and or use of generics. Generics are a key point in determining demand when it comes to planning for future needs. So let's talk a little bit about generic resources. Generics are really very much like users, but they have a couple of benefits and drawbacks. One is that they will also follow a work schedule, so you can assign a generic, a 8-hour a day, 5-day-a-week work schedule, same as you can an end user. They can also be named after a role or a type of skill. So for example, I need a project manager, I need a developer, I need a consultant. These are all, you can pretty much name generics based on how you want to measure your future demand and fulfilling that future demand. Generics also support entity tags as well as custom fields, same as user records. So any user record you put on a custom field, any custom field you put on a user record is supported. And you can also have skill profiles within a generic resource. So if you're using skill profiles, generics are available there as well. Biggest benefit is they do not require a license. So you can have unlimited generics. You can get creative as well in how you build and benefit and manage your generic resourcing. Generics also can be assigned to job code, which is the commonality between the user and the generic. And this is where you get into the ability to use that job code based on future demand, based on FTE forecasts. So in the example below, we can show how we have future needs in October, November, and December, and we can show using job code need requirements. And then we can also add what we talked about last month, which is that quantity on staff option within the job code. So this gives you the ability to be able to forecast our demand for different types of generics or different types of job codes that against what we have on staff to start making determination if we have excess staff or we have not enough staff. When you are building these reports, you may want to make sure you check the box to exclude the inactive entities. So you make sure you get both inactive and active users scheduled in the future if you have any. Hours-based. So hours-based is same approach as FTE, except you're using hours instead of full-time equivalents. So in this case, we're using assigned hours or booked hours, depending on the basis for which you're looking forward or planning your demand. You can also use assigned hours with actuals and booked hours with actuals. And one note, in this example, we have booked hours using by job code. We have consultant 435. And you'll notice in the second column, booked hours with actuals, it's only showing 290. Well, because generic resources don't enter time and the booked with actuals is looking today back for time, if there's no time, you're only seeing booked forward for any generic resources, which is why you have the change in the values for the current month. But this allows you to look forward to the number of hours you need by the different types of resources and focus on demand by hours. Demand by money is also very common, and this is where we get into not just the scheduling component, but also leveraging billing rules and charge projections. There's also an option for straight line forecasting, which we'll talk about when the best case to use that. But the common reporting values here are projected billing, projected revenue, you can get projected costs, projected margin. These are all common out of the box values in OpenAir reporting. Here's an example of an OpenAir report converted into a dashboard. It's showing our future demand, which is our blue lines of by month. What does our future demand look like in dollars? And it's also showing our capacity of being able to deliver. So this is where we're marrying the capacity, we're marrying the demand, and we'll be able to show the two compare to each other. So we can see it looks like we've got more demand than we have capacity, and that can have us start to look at alternative options to bring in additional resources or start reshuffling your demand work to start moving those out, having those conversations with customers about when we can actually get started. This is the types of proactive discussions you start to have when you're able to get this type of data out of the system. Refresher on charge projections. These are all available under the project settings. Charge projections are generally run on a global basis, generally in the middle of the night to refresh the charge projection table. And then you can determine what the basis of those projections are. And this is depending on how you plan your resourcing. So booked hours, which is pretty common, it's looking at booked hours, but it does not factor in any actual hours. If you're looking at this month, it's only going to look at booked. This will give you both generic resources and named resources users. Signed hours, same thing, other than except that it's using project plans and assignments versus using bookings. If you look at approved hours or worked hours, you're going to pick up only timesheet data, which is going to apply only to your named users. Approved and booked, approved and assigned will pick up partially for generics for the booking part, but not for the approved, and then same for worked and worked. So, the typical, most customers using bookings to plan their future, and looking at worked and booked gives you that ability to look in the past and future and marry the two to get a forecasted demand based on that dollars expected to be delivered. Straight line billing projections, these are common, and what we see here is where these are where you're bringing in projects from your CRM very early in the stage, and maybe you don't have a lot of details as to the resourcing plan or the bill rates. You just need to know I have a dollar amount, and I know approximately the start date, approximate the end date, or the duration. And I want to be able to just have a forecasted demand based on those data. So in this scenario, we say, we expected to start on January 1st, expected to end in the end of April. We have $100,000, and it's not actually spreading it completely evenly across all months, because it is taking into impact how many workable days are within a month. So in this example, March and April have different work days than January and February. So it's spreading that $100,000 between those different months. So this is a way to do this. And this is one of those features you don't actually have to enable. It actually is, an Easter egg type of feature, where if you just some custom fields and a little bit of setup, and you can have this available to you. So there is a custom checkbox needed on a project stage that allows you to determine in what stage do you want the projections to create these straight line projections rather than using the standard projections. And then once you create the checkbox, you go in and create the stages to which you want to use this. This will then allow this to create those straight line projections in any projects within the stage. Now, the project has to have a few items. It has to have a budget, and it has to have a start date, which is the default start date, but it also has to have an end date. And out of the box, OpenAir projects don't have end dates. So you have to create a custom field. All these custom fields have to be exactly the syntax that I have here in this slide. You create a project date field, project _end_ date field, and then that will determine the start and end date of your charge projections. So in summary, demand is the eye of the beholder. There's a lot of different ways to measure demand in OpenAir. We talked about a lot of those, but resource scheduling and forecasting, you want to consider for pipeline, bringing in projects early, being able to get the complete view of your demand is important. And then, it's demanded by itself is nice, but you need to be able to marry that against what is my capacity for delivering that demand. And the two combined are really very powerful KPIs to be able to guide professional service organizations. And then you can all the data in the system allows you to be able to group using job codes or entity tags to really get more insight into your FTE requirements. So again, thank you everyone for joining today. Really appreciate everyone. We're going to go ahead and pause the recording.